then I'm back in that water and I'm fighting under the water, and it's like my throat hurts so bad it feels like it's going to burst. But the time I'm just 5 years old. All I know is I'm drowning. Hi, my name is Peggy Robinson. I live in Long Bottom, Ohio, and I'm a retired social worker, counselor, child abuse investigator. And I now have a podcast called NDETV. I have interviewed over 400 near-death experiencers and filmmakers, researchers, and I'm just interested in getting these stories out there. When I was 5 years old, I was sitting in my bedroom playing with my Barbie dolls, and my mom walked in and said, "It's hot outside. Let's go swimming." She says, "You and John, my brother, go on ahead, and which is my sister Terry, she says, me and Terry will be down after bed." So I got my little bikini on and I run out the door. My brother's in his trunks and he goes out the back door and I follow him and we run down the hill to the pond. And I'm so excited because this is like freedom. Your parents are letting you go do something on your own when usually they're right there watching you do everything. But the thing was, it was weird too because he's not the type brother to watch out for little sister. He was probably about 7. And we run down to the pond. He goes the furthest into the pond, dives into the middle, and goes back. He keeps doing these laps. And so I'm standing there in the side of the pond, keep looking up the house, waiting for my mom and my sister. They're not coming. And I think, well, I want to get in the water. So I walked in a little. And when my parents was always there watching me, they always said, "Be careful because there's drop offs. You could go under." And they always had an older sibling right there beside me to grab me in case I fell under. Here I am by myself. So I'm doing what I know I should do. I'm just keeping my feet right there, right in the water, not going too far so I don't fall under. But then I see a board floating. And I think I could use that for a raft and I could do laps like my brother's doing. So that's what I did. I got my little belly on that board and I went paddling out to the center of the pond and my brother's doing his laps. And I said, "Hey, John, look at me." And he started swimming real fast towards me. And I thought, just before he got there, I thought, "Oh no, he's going to take my board. He always takes my toys." And that's exactly what he did. He took my board and took off doing his laps on my board. Here I am at the center of the pond and I don't know how to swim. And I'm trying to keep above water, and my head was only up a minute maybe before I'm under. And now I'm screaming underwater, and I'm so scared, and the water's so muddy brown, and I start tumbling, and I'm trying to get back above water, but I've lost a sense of direction. And I don't know if I'm going down deeper or sideways, and I'm just screaming. And then all of a sudden, I am at the ceiling of the kitchen watching my mom and my sister get stuff ready out of the cabinets to bring down the pond like they were planning a little picnic. And I don't hear anything of this world. I just feel their emotions. I can feel their concentration, their calmness of both of them. And then I'm back in that water and I'm fighting under the water, and it's like my throat hurts so bad it feels like it's going to burst. So I guess my consciousness must have left for a moment and come back. But the time I'm just 5 years old. All I know is I'm drowning. And then I wake up still underwater, only now it's a bright light, real pretty shiny green. And it's like you just wake up from a nap, that real calm, peaceful feeling, like all is well. And I thought, what was I afraid of? There's no such thing as drowning. My parents lied to me. I can remember every thought that I had during this. And how that's even possible, I don't know. But it seems like these NDEs must be like entombed in our soul or something. They're just preserved, like right before and after of these events. And then I drifted down to the bottom of the pond, which before would have terrified me. And a vision opened up, a memory of me being in the living room of our house. And I walked over to the fish tank and I had noticed Mom had put some pink rocks in there in a little plastic treasure chest. And I remember thinking that day, wonder why the fish, when I stick my hand in, they're afraid of my hand, but they're not afraid of this treasure. It was just a thought, a memory I had. But that memory, it was like a way something was teaching me that I was dead. And a voice come in and says, like, the fish knows something you don't. You're dead. Like, oh. And I was like responding to that information. Like, oh, I didn't know I was dead. Well, I don't want to be a dead girl bottom of this pond. So there's like this guidance there with me. Since I don't want to be at the bottom of the pond, my spirit rises up because my body still stayed down there. My spirit rises up and I thought, wow, my vision's different. I can see below the water and above the water at the same time. Just like if you were looking at a fish tank, you can see above and below. It's like, my vision's different. And I thought, well, I'm bored with below. I want to go above. So I went up higher about to the treetops, straight above where I had drowned. And I looked around and I thought, this is high enough for now because I'm still afraid of heights. And there's like this dialogue going on, like, well, that's silly, you're dead. And I'm talking to like myself. And I say, well, I know, but this is new to me and I'm just getting used to it. I could go higher later. And I looked around above the pond and I thought, which way do I want to go? Right towards Belpre, left towards Marietta. I looked across the pond and I could, since I was high up, I could see across Route 7 over to the higher river. And then I heard a female voice, and I could tell where the voice was. It was a certain distance from me, but I couldn't see anyone. And it's like a young adult female. And she said, no, don't. If they find you soon, you might go back. And I thought, go back. That's not how death works. We don't go back. Like, I know that much. And I thought, well, I suppose I should listen because, she sounds like an adult. Then I thought, I don't have to listen to anybody anymore. I don't have to go in at bedtime. I don't have to eat my vegetables. I don't have to do anything. So I'm going to go do what I want to do. And I thought, I want to go find kids to play with. So, mostly old people die. This is my 5-year-old logic. And there's got to be kids that have died somewhere. So I want to go find kids. And so I went right towards Belpre and there was a house there. And it was like it was this abandoned house in the woods. And I went along the side of the house. And I had never found that house. I have drove around there and I could not find a house that looks like this. So I went right through the door. And when I went in, there's old people sitting around this table talking. And they stopped talking as soon as I walked in and turned and looked at me. And I was shy because back in the 60s, kids didn't interrupt adults when they were talking. And so I kind of had my head in shame and I said, I'm looking for kids to play with. And an old man sat at the end of the table, turned to me and he said, well, go check the graveyards. So when I remember this years later, I thought, that's ridiculous. Why would anybody say that? Like, this can't be true. Like, this must be some kind of, I don't know what it is, but it was a recurring memory. And so I thought, well, okay. He told me to go find graveyards. And I knew where some was in Marietta. So I went back to the pond and then I went down the highway, Route 7 towards Marietta. And I remember the billboard, almost running into the billboard and then dropping down on the west side of Marietta, going towards where my grandma lived. And there was kids running around the yard playing kickball. I stopped and was playing kickball. And I thought, well, this is bored. They can't see me. And so I went on down the street towards my grandma's house. She lived on the right, but I went through the houses on the left, in and out of these houses. And then at some point, because there's this memory of that happening, but then there's another part of me. It's like, but I know I never left the center of the pond. And I couldn't conceive for decades. Maybe you can be in more places than once when you're dead, because it seemed like these things happen simultaneously. And so I was above the pond and I'm looking down and my mom and sister are now sitting on a bed sheet at the pond, sunbathing, rubbing lotion on their arms and legs. And I can't hear them talking, but I see them talking. And again, I feel their emotions. I feel their close relationship. And I felt jealous of my sister. And I felt sad because I thought I'll never be old enough to have a conversation with my mom like that. And I looked on the other side of the pond and I see my brother doing his laps. And I felt this rage and anger like I never had as a child before, that he caused me to die by taking my board and he don't even care. He's just on that board. And I could feel his essence of just concern about himself and what he was doing. And at some point I had a knowing that my family didn't love me. And then a voice said, children are sent here to be loved. That is why God sends them here. And I got angry. I was like, wait a minute. You show me my family don't love me and then you tell me that, that's why we're sent here and I'm not loved. And this strong feeling of injustice grew in me that I can pinpoint what to this day I still have that. Like anything that is injustice wise, it just really infuriates me. And I think that's when it grew. And then from this, all of a sudden, I wake up and I'm being carried over my brother John's shoulder and I'm throwing up water down his back. And as I'm dangling, I can see my mom and sister walking up ahead of him, almost to the train tracks, getting ready to go up the hill to our house. And they're walking real quiet and I could feel their emotions still. They have this like best friend kind of like, my mom's in trouble and my sister's like kind of consoling her, talking to her about it. And then my brother John, he don't like me throw up on his back this water. So he says, Mom, can I put her down now? And my mom and sister both turn at the same time and they look over their left shoulder and my mom went, took a sigh of relief because he had been carrying my dead body on his shoulder up to the house. And she sees now I'm alive. And she, yes, like agreed he could put me down. But then my sister and my mom just turned right around and continued walking up the hill. My brother put me down on my feet and ran up after him to the house. So now I'm standing there alone on this road in front of the train tracks with this belly full of pond water. I'm sick and I'm weak. And I stood there with this knowledge that a 5-year-old shouldn't have, that their family don't love them, and God sends us here to be loved. And I felt ripped off. And I didn't know the words, but I thought it was my right because it was my life. And I thought, why would I go up to that hill to a family who don't love me? Because I was just having fun flying. And that's what I want to do. So I thought, I know drowning really hurts, but I'm not going to fight it this time. I'm going to turn around and walk back to that pond. And I'm going to go back to the pond and go do what I was doing. And just as I took a step to do that, the voice that I heard before, I see now is an angel. And she's hovering over the road. And she says, no, don't. I said, why? You know, they don't love me. And she says, well, you'll have a lot of love someday. I said, where will I find it? Kind of like trying to keep her there with me a little longer. And she pointed right towards Belpre. And she was gone. And she was just like this shape of a young woman in this flowing white gown with long sleeves at the bottom and long at the bottom by her feet. And she was just flown a few feet above the road, and then she was gone. So I walked on up to the house, and that was my drowning. And some strange things happened after that has taken me a long time to understand. You know, went fishing with our parents like a week later, and I was bored with fishing because I seen more of fish than I cared to from drowning, and I felt led. Something's like, come over here. And I thought, I don't want to go over here. Over here's this lake, and it's pretty over here, and it's old, like dried mud, cracked mud, and dry, ugly sticks and leaves over in there. I don't want to go. So I was like, come over here. I went over and I sat down, and I believe it was the angel's way of continuing to communicate with me. And so I sat down and I saw this wildflower growing out from under a rock. Here's this ugly mess, and here's this beautiful flower. And somehow at 5 years old, it's like this flower became my friend. It was like dancing in the wind, and I'm talking to this flower like, how did you do this? You grew out from under a rock. And then I started getting these visions, just like I did with the fishbowl. These visions started to open up. I saw my mom and her sisters talking about flowers that are hard to grow, and one of them said, oh, you could only grow that like a flower shop. And I saw girls in my Sunday school class with pretty dresses and socks and shoes. And then a voice said that I was like this wildflower, that I didn't need all of that showering like those girls had, that I was going to grow up in a very harsh environment like this wildflower had. But I too would celebrate my victory someday. So it was just like, it was telling me my fortune, that I was going to have this very hard time growing up. But because of it, I'd have a strength inside of me like a wildflower. And those other girls would never know this kind of strength. And so I just walked away kind of skipping, I was real happy, like, oh, I'm going to be, I'm going to be strong. And it said, I was getting ready to leave, and it says, oh yeah, and one more thing, you're going to be beautiful. So to tell a little 5-year-old girl that loves to play with Barbie dolls, something like that. And so it was like this secret I kept in me. And then 20 years later, I was married, and I had 3 little boys, and I was 2 months pregnant for twins, and we had just bought property, was getting ready to build a new home, and my life was perfect. I did have that horrible childhood that I had overcome when I got married, and had made a promise to myself when I turned 18 that I would somehow help kids, that I would help kids that were unloved like me. And I kind of made that promise to myself after the drowning that night when I went home. So here I am, happy. My life is wonderful. And I started having pain. I called my doctor and said, I think it's a dual pregnancy. I'm having this pain when I walk. And he says, no. He says, it's just where your uterus is stretching. You've had 2 C-sections before, and now you're pregnant for twins. And I had surgery my husband had made me get my tubes tied at age 20. And I found out when I was 25, I get it reversed. So I'd had that surgery just a month prior, tubal reversal or tubal ligation. And so as the days went by that week, I kept calling the doctor every few days, said, the pain's worse, the pain's worse. He said, you're fine. Because I started calling on Monday. By Friday, the pain was so bad. I told my husband, take the kids down to your mom's, take me to the hospital. And the hospital's like an hour away. And as we're driving to the hospital, the pain gets worse and worse. And we're almost to the hospital, and all of a sudden the pain left in such a strange way that inside I just had this knowing, wherever the pain just went, that's where I'm going. Like I was trailing behind it. And I thought, oh my gosh, I'm dying. So I said a prayer, God, don't let me die right here. We're almost to the hospital. My husband will have to pull over. He'll be freaking out and, be alone. Probably cars will, have to pull over and console him. Just let me, if I'm going to die, let me get to the hospital. And so got to the hospital. And I told the nurse, I said, I don't know if I'm going to pass out or I'm going to throw up. I said, but I think it's a dual pregnancy. So they put me in a wheelchair with a bowl in my lap in case I got sick, and had my husband stay and sign papers. Just as we started down this long hall to find an exam room for me, I thought, oh, I'm going to be sick. I need to get that bowl because my hands are on the armrest of the wheelchair. And as I went to get the bowl, I realized I couldn't move a finger. I thought, oh my gosh, I've lost contact with my body because I didn't want to throw up all over myself. I wanted to get that bowl. And then next second, I thought, oh, wait, I'm not going to throw up after all. I'm going to pass out. And I was very familiar with passing out because I had irritable bowel for a long time. And it got to the point 2 or 3 times a week I was vomiting, passing out. So passing out, you just wake up and you feel better for a while before you're sick again. There's no dreaming or anything. So I was familiar with passing out. And so that's what I just expected to happen. And my chin hit my chest. All of a sudden, it's like what I would call a rocket taken off through space. And it seemed like I was in a tunnel, like a tight space. But it seemed like maybe if you were like being sucked through a straw, like you're going through something, but you can kind of see through it. And I could tell I was going through galaxy and galaxy and galaxy. My first thought was, I got to run away because I got to get back and raise my boys. I can't be dying here because if I'm got to be dead, because where am I? I've never experienced anything like this. I'm just like shot like a rock. And there's this loud wind speed noise in my sound. And I say, my children, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to leave you. And then all of a sudden I look around and that loud bumpy ride is now complete quiet and silence. I look down and I can't see me, but I feel just like me. And it's all bright white light. And I'm just contained in light. Like if it was a room, it would be the wall, ceiling, floor, but also through the middle is you're contained in light. And I thought, why am I alone? I mean, this must be heaven. Am I going to be alone for eternity? And I remember thinking, God, you need to send people back and let them know it's real because the Bible's getting old. So I said at 25, the Bible's getting old and people don't understand it or they don't want to read it or they don't believe anymore. But people need to know that heaven is real. You know, maybe people would change their lives. I remember having this little thought. But then mostly I was thinking, I don't want to be alone. And then I looked to my right. And I always kind of describe it like if I was in a clock and I'm the center of the clock and say about 2 o'clock to 3 to 4, I see this outline of people standing there. I can't make out anything other than it's bright white light, a real faint outline like of the shoulders and the head going down the arms. And I see a row standing and then I see a row, looks like they're sitting up front of that row that's standing. And so my eyes are squinting as if I have eyes because I feel like I do. And it seems like one's sitting up front and center. And I thought, that has to be God. I have a complaint department. And I thought, I'm going to complain. I want out of here. I want to go back. And I was told the answer is no. It is my time. And over to my left, I saw a scene open up and explain something to me. And I see this scene, and it's like you just walk into a grocery store, and there's a lady there cashing people out, and there's a boy in front of it, a little boy, and he's throwing a fit about what he wants, and he wants right now. And I thought, that must be God showing me that's how I'm acting. Like something a young mother would understand. I'm acting like a spoiled child. Like I need to straighten up. So now me at the center of this clock, if you picture straight ahead of me at 12 o'clock, because that's the best way I can, describe it. I see me across, like it's 12 o'clock, a physical me. And I'm screaming out every abuse I ever went through. My dad did this, my mom did this, my stepdad did this, my siblings did this, as a way to tell God, I cannot leave my kids down there on earth. Like, I'm thinking he don't understand how bad it is down there. It's like feeding my kids to the wolves. What if my mom gets custody of my kids and she raises them and they go through the hell that I went through? I cannot have one thing that happened to me happen to my kids. And so I think, okay, God's the boss. He said, it is my time. So I said, okay. I said, God, if you can show me that my kids would be better off without me for whatever reason, I agree to stay. But if not, I beg to return. And then I see a man from behind. So back in the clock, it would be about 1 o'clock. I see him like he's standing clear at an edge on the left. And all of a sudden, I just woof right beside him. And I don't like stop and look at him because as soon as we are shoulder to shoulder, we drop down. And suddenly we are at our trailer we were living at the time because we hadn't built our house yet. The boys were in their trailer. And at first it was just the roof at night. And then we went down inside where I could see we're at the ceiling. And I look down and I see my 3 boys are in their bedroom discussing the fact that mom has died. And my middle son, Jeremy, says to his older brother, Matthew, he says, I don't care that you said mom is dead. I want her back and I want her back right now. And I felt his pain so bad. And every time I remember that, it brings tears to my eyes and breaks my heart. I just like retract, like it's too hard. And I'm back in the white light, but now I'm in a physical body. And I am crumbled in front of that panel that's sitting, in front of the panel that's standing. I'm in front of that, on my knees, crumbled. I know I have physical body because my hands come up in front of me and I see them. And God is in the middle. I'm still just the outline. But I know that Jesus is on God's left because he's on my right. And I'm in front of Jesus, like kind of like between God and Jesus maybe, but I'm more addressing Jesus because my hands come up and I say, who else will teach them about you? And then I'm back in the wheelchair. And I think, what the hell was that? I was just dead and accepting it. And they got me a room and the doctor come in, he prepped me for a DNC and he says, Peggy, it's not a tubal pregnancy. I don't know why you keep saying that. Your uterus is still intact. I couldn't tell him because I was just dead in heaven. So I refused to go home because I knew if I went home, my boys would find me dead. And I thought they'd be better off if my husband just got a call in the morning instead of the boys finding me dead. I thought that was my only option. So during the night, I kept waking up, vomiting all over myself. The bowl would be empty because I was passing out. The pain was coming back. And the next morning, they took me to ultrasound. And they said it was the biggest tubal pregnancy the hospital ever saw. I had internal bleeding, filling my entire abdominal cavity clear to my chest. They called my whole family in and said she's not going to make it. And they sent me upstairs because I'm an organ donor. And I had to sign all these papers. I was so mad because I waited all week for the doctor to fix this and then all night. And I felt like I was going to die signing papers, like, just get me to surgery. So I went into surgery and I woke up. My doctor's like, Peggy, I'm so sorry. I know how bad you wanted these twins. And so that was that NDE. I had put those memories in the back of my mind because I didn't have anybody to talk to. I didn't know what this even called. And in 2010, I was a counselor and a client come in and I recognized his last name. And I said, did you go to those family reunions? And he's like, yeah. And I said, so I told him a little story I'd never told before. And I said, we was all lined up to get food. This was right after I lost the twins, like the next month, because I was pregnant again. And I said, was all lined to get food. And I heard a child crying and nobody else heard it. And so I went out in the field and I felt led. And since then, I realized feeling led at the Vito Lake when I was little after the drowning, it was like that same kind of led feeling. Like maybe I was taught to be led and follow. And it's just now used, because I didn't think all that then. It's just I put it together now. But I felt led. Crying had stopped. Suddenly a voice said, go to that tall grass. I thought, tall grass? What could be in that tall grass? I walked over and this little boy was drowning. He was face down in this ditch. And I reached up and picked him up. And he looked at me like he'd seen a ghost. He ran over to his parents, was pointing, and they were looking at me like they could not see me. And I thought, I'm standing right here. And I say that was 1986, right after I lost the twins. So now I'm talking to this guy. Of course, I didn't tell him the full thing, but I was like, so this little boy's around the ditch, and I picked him up. And he leaned way back in his chair. He said, that was you? That was my little brother. He swears to this day an angel saved him. He says, I can't wait to tell Mom we now know who that was. And that got me thinking, what are these stories? These memories. How is this all connected? And there wasn't a lot of answers. So that's why I started my podcast, to just try to find answers like, what's going on here? After doing my podcast for it's like 4 years now, I have come to see the commonalities in the experiences. And I'm finding out that there's our NDE and then there's our interpretation of it when we come back. Some people might get with NDE organization and they might say, don't use the names God's Jesus. You got to be neutral. Or go to this medium or read this book. And so they kind of get more new age conclusions on their NDE, where other ones might go to the church and they'll quote from the Bible. And you have to have an NDE that's factual to the Bible. And it doesn't matter what they make of it when they come back with our brain, because it seems like to me these NDEs are stored in our soul and they're kind of like entombed like an egg. And like we kind of sit on them until we're ready to start processing. It can take decades. Or some people I really admire nowadays, they have NDE, they come out of that, they know what it is, they know where to go on the internet and find the information. Back then, mine was almost 60 years ago. But the drowning, I pushed it away. I was a little kid. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. But after my second NDE at 25, I was sitting outside one night after the little child in the ditch incident, the reunion. I had miscarried the moment I pulled that little boy up. And I was sitting there looking up the night sky, just trying to, why did I lose these babies? I'm mourning and I have nobody to talk to. And I'm looking at the night sky and the stars, and all of a sudden the drowning from front to back come across like I was watching a movie trailer and it took me over. And the next day I went to my mom. I was like, did I drown when I was little? She says, yeah, you did. How did you remember that? And so she had to think about it for a while. And she says, I remember that now. She says, when I looked around, you weren't there. And so I told John, my brother, he says, where did you see her last? And you keep going down under the water. So you keep going down until you find her. And I didn't know till a couple years ago that my mom said she didn't know how to swim. I didn't know that. And that's why she was having my brother dive down. She says, you keep going down until you find her. And so he had found me and he was carrying my body back to the house. And my sister says, yeah, I remember that. And my brother asked him, he says, yeah, you got me in a lot of trouble that day. You were always getting me in trouble. Of course, when I say, was I dead? She says, what are you talking about? I said, well, John was carrying my body over his shoulder up to the house. Yeah. And I said, was I dead? She goes, no, not hardly. And I'm thinking, what's her thinking? This child's been underwater a long time and he has to keep going down to find her. They were sitting down there quite a while before she realized I wasn't there. So how long was I under? I have no idea. But yeah, they remember it. And I had to think about it a long time before I started talking about it to too many people because, after the twins, I told my ex-husband and he said, I know how it sounds, but I believe you. But I didn't know the name of NDE or anything to look up to find out if it happened to other people. I didn't know. I thought I was the only one it ever happened to. And then when I started hearing it happened to other people at first, I thought, wow, that's really interesting. And why am I so drawn to this subject? And then I started thinking, was mine NDE? Because it felt so little and I didn't know how on earth I would ever express it like these people to get on a stage. And I could never do that. Well, then I started thinking I wanted to do that. I didn't know if I could do it, but I wanted to try. And the first time I told it at a group, I felt like I was levitating. When I felt like I was hovering over the pond when I told about it, I felt like I was hovering in that bright white light. And it's like something happens to us when we share our story. There's something that opens up in us and it just feels like bliss. And there's this excitement and it stays for a while. And I didn't understand that. The first time it happened, I was really like, what's going on? I had to go to Walmart and buy my granddaughter a bicycle for her birthday party. And I'm like, I can't feel my feet. And there's so much excitement. Like even after this, I'll be walking around just in this excitement stage for a while. There's this energy that just starts pumping through you when you tell your story.